So it's my great pleasure from here to introduce you to your speakers for today. You know, when I joined the Asia Society Switzerland 6 years ago, just as the center was about to open, it just so happens that in the first few months, there was a big exhibition of works from Uli Sig's collection on display in 2 Swiss museums. And Uli was kind enough to welcome our members and trustees for several tours. So I visited the exhibition and revisited it several times. And I slowly became aware of the vastness of this collection and the magnitude of Uli's work on Chinese art. Of course, Uli's life has been connected to China for decades. He went to China in 1980 to build a joint venture for Schindler, the first of its kind at the time. He later returned as the Swiss ambassador to China, Mongolia, and North Korea. Along the way, he not just built the world's foremost collection of contemporary Chinese art, but also developed a deep understanding for the complex and rapidly changing country. As a board member of Asia Society Switzerland, he has continuously and very generously shared this knowledge with our audience at various events. I'm delighted that today he is sharing his story at Asia Society Hong Kong, just a few days before the M+ Museum, to which he donated a large part of his collection, will open. Uli today will be interviewed on stage by Ronnie Chan, who of course is the chairman of Asia Society Hong Kong and chairman emeritus of Asia Society. And as Ronnie has briefly mentioned before, when Asia Society Switzerland was really just an idea, Ronnie traveled to Zurich to lend his support and convince potential donors and stakeholders, which is very successful. We're very deeply grateful for his continued support and for the support and excellent collaboration with the entire Asia Society Hong Kong team. And of course, we really, really hope that we get to see you and get to come visit you very soon again. Finally, let me just express my thanks to the Consulate General of Switzerland in Hong Kong for supporting today's event. I very much look forward to the discussion, for which I am now, virtually so to speak, leaving the floor to Ronnie and Uli. Thank you again for having me, and goodbye from Paris.
Just for your information, when the Swiss Center was started, we were very hopeful that Uli would take the chair, but Uli, as is always the humble person that he is, conceded to the position to another gentleman who is more than capable. So we're delighted that Uli, you can still at least serve on the board of our Zurich Center. The Paris Center, by the way, also was initiated right here in Hong Kong. Some members from here who have a home in Paris really went back there and started the Paris Center. So the Hong Kong Center is really very helpful to the entire body of the Asia Society. So ladies and gentlemen, with that, shall we welcome to the stage Dr. Uli Sig. Uli, great to have you with us. We are so honored that Asia Society should have such a distinguished individual. Generals, great to have you as well. Welcome, in particular from Switzerland. You know, when somebody talk to you about Switzerland, you know, I don't think of, you know, what comes to mind. It's not a particular person usually. It's really, you know, the highest per capita income, very advanced civilization, technologically advanced, right? Very good democracy, some people think. Very seldom do I think of individuals. You can think of a few, you know, Federer or Cao Jung or somebody. But then, you know, you don't think of too many names. So Switzerland is really a country where everybody, the standard of everybody is very, very high. And yet, you don't think about people who stands out. I think, Uli, in as much as low-key you are, you're not a guy who always grab attentions, yet what you have done is really, really very amazing. I think history will remember you as a very, very great Swiss, as well as a very, very great human being. So, Uli, Uli, you had a very interesting career. Many of you know that he came to China in 1979 for Schindler. And by the way, I'm a big user of Schindler elevators. So, are you related to the Schindler family?
I am not.
You're not?
Yeah.
So
but,
you're just an executive?
Well, my family had a share in Schindler already for several generations. So, but not related. But if I may just respond to what you just said, I mean, I could listen to you for hours, Ronnie, how you praise me.
We had to hear him.
And some of it may be true, but we have to say about the Swiss nation, you described very accurately, not many Swiss would be known by name. And that has to do with our democracy, extreme democracy. And no one in Switzerland is supposed to become powerful or better known than others. That's a trait in Swiss habits, and particularly the politicians, our government, 7 ministers, one of them president, changes each year so that no one could excel in this group, which actually in the statistics makes us the most unstable country in the world, because, you know, we change presidents each year. So we rank there with some African states.
That's by definition, because you have to, by constitution, to change every year, but that doesn't mean that you're the most unstable, right? That's a big difference between the two. But anyway, why were you a journalist when you were younger? Were you rebellious or something? You come from a distinguished family. You could have, you know, had a doctorate in law, and so why did you become a journalist?
I have always been a troublemaker, is what everyone in my environment thought, because when somewhere like a window was broken or something had happened when I was a child, everyone would immediately point to me, but very often it wasn't me. Yeah. So why did I become a journalist? I never ever thought a moment in my education and then when I studied law to become a journalist, but it was like many other things that followed, a kind of incident led to such a choice. I did a trip, we'll keep it very short, did a trip to the Near and Mid East, early 70s, and because we finished with 2 friends my studies, so we said, let's go, you know, we went to Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, the United Arab Emirates, etc. And by some weird coincidence, I could make ourselves be invited by the Emir of Ras Al Khaimah, which is one of the Emirates.
I know the present one.
Yeah, very good. So then I told this to a friend of mine, because in the meantime, the oil crisis broke out. So all of a sudden there was big interest for this region, which no one had any idea. At an oil price of $3, no one cared where the oil is coming from. So all of a sudden that was in the center, and a friend of mine worked in an office for journalism. He brought me there, and then I told my story, why I was in the Middle East, and that led to the editor-in-chief saying, you are exactly the man we look for, you know, don't you want to become a journalist? I said, I have no idea of journalism. And he said, well, you know, we will teach you. So a day later, I was a journalist.
In what city?
In Zurich.
In Zurich, yeah.
For economics. So I focused on the Near East, Middle East, OPEC and such things for a few years. And that's why I went to Schindler, because the Schindler people were very eager to expand into this era. So they asked me to join the Schindler group. I was very hesitant, because I said, you know, why being a journalist, every day you speak to the most clever people in the world, at least that's what you think. You know, why go into this sober world of elevators and, you know, industry? Yet I did go there, and so I worked for the Middle East, you know, to sell to Saudi Arabian kings and all that. Very interesting. And then one day, early 79, a Chinese delegation came to Schindler, and so in the end, since they didn't always know exactly what to do with this journalist, you know, with me, they said, you do China. No one had any idea about what China would ever become.
So you moved to China?
I didn't move then, because I spent about half my time on each end of the collaboration. We set up the first joint venture in the world for China, and we had 2 factories in Shanghai and Beijing, and there was a lot of going back and forth, technology transfer, complicated negotiations. At that time, China was a planned economy, you know very well, and of course no one had an idea what the joint venture, what the company is, what a legal system, legal framework would be, and so on. So.
Was the Schindler board comprised of sane people? 1979 going to China, I mean, that's unimaginable. What was the consideration, do you think? Were they really looking for one day make a lot of money, as subsequently I think it did?
Well, at that time, of course, in the Western world, everyone thought, just as you described, it's crazy to bring money or technology to China. Why should anyone do that? And I, at that time, saw that whoever does the first joint venture cannot fail, because this will be, of course, you have to make it into a model, and then it cannot fail. So that's why
because China cannot afford to have it fail.
Afford, yeah, and they needed a global company like Schindler to show to the world, yes, it can be done. You can bring money, you can bring technology to China. So that's why for China this was very important at the time, and of course for us, and this was like an insurance policy in my mind. But it was about as difficult to sell this joint venture idea to the Schindler board as it was to the Chinese.
So it was your idea, it was not the Schindler board's idea?
Not the Schindler board. Yeah.
Your idea.
Yeah. Well, I can't say.
You're the one I should ask. Are you sane or not? No, I asked the wrong party.
No, I cannot say. My idea was to do exactly that joint venture. I just went there, and we analyzed, and then I suggested to Schindler to do this step.
Wow.
But as I said, was also a fight, and I also remember at that time. Of course, there were other negotiations that started for other joint ventures. And for instance, General Motors was negotiating in parallel. And actually, the board of General Motors turned the joint venture down. They could have had the best position in China.
That's why
if they were daring enough, but they were not.
Right, correct. I heard the story directly from the guy who negotiated with General Motors that when they saw all the documents, they were crazy. But anyway, General Motors has regretted it ever since. But put on your hat as a shareholder of Schindler, not as the manager in the front line, the vice president, and so forth. Do you think that as a shareholder, you approve today of that decision to go into China in 1979? You make a lot of money. Did you make a lot of money?
It's pretty much a no-brainer because China, say, for the elevator industry, represents like 60% of the world market. Maybe not today, but until recently, from zero. So you have no choice. If you're a big global company, you just have to gain that volume advantage and others that you have with the Chinese market. Of course, it was extremely difficult. I mean, these years, and that's why I have no hair left. So that was, and there were many risks because the political situation, like throughout the 80s and even early 90s, was such that you would never know whether the reformers would win or whether the hardcore left wing would win, even though in hindsight it looks very simple, but it wasn't.
So when you were there, apart from the business difficulties, let's leave that aside, just as a human being growing up in the West, what went through your head every day when you think about China? Looking at all the gray things, the polluted air, and everybody wearing Mao suits or black and blue, and that's it. What went through your head? What was your impression? What gave you the impetus to say, okay, I'll stay here?
Of course, I was a young man at that time, and then that's the adventure. And of course, it was the white spot on the globe, that's left, was China. And, how could you resist if you were like a daring young person to go and try, at least try? So for me, there was no thinking about, would I go there or not? But I was totally ignorant about China. So we had this myth, in the West about China at that time. No one really was knowledgeable. And so, you thought this great mystic power, and I thought when I first time entered, Chinese soil, you think, wow, there will be thunder, and, this will be just such a, immense experience. And then, you see, of course, all these new things, new to us. All we knew about China, I'm speaking for the average European person now, who had no engagement whatsoever. We knew images from Cultural Revolution at that time. And the left in Europe, and in particular the militant left, was demonstrating with the Red Mao books, with Mao posters. So we only knew that much about China, really.
What about the personal side of things? I mean, I was in mainland China in 1980, and the food was lousy, and the pork I got was only fat, no lean meat, and there's no coffee, of which you love, no Nescafe. I'm sorry, forget about Nespresso. But can you handle that? It's very dirty and polluted. And did it bother you?
Actually, I admit I love fat meat. I love fat meat. So, it was a great asset. But it's as you say, the waiters at that time were not there for you. You were there for them. They would tell you what you get. Or if you would go to a shop, same. The shop people, they gather around and chat, and you're just a nuisance there as a client, and you're disturbing. So that was the situation at the time, and no coffee. Green tea everywhere. So and the only place, like 79, you could get the coffee was the Beijing Museum. I don't know what I'm saying. The Beijing Hotel.
Right.
Yeah. So we hoped always we could go there. Even we hoped we could live in the Beijing Hotel. Sometimes we could, but never a room on our own. Always had to share the room.
You shared the room with who? I mean, with foreigners?
No, someone from
your friend,
the company.
You're from a company, yeah.
Company.
Okay.
No.
Now, let's just one question about your ambassadorship in Beijing. Why did you? Sorry, I should in front of the Consul General. Why did your country send you, who has no background in diplomacy? China is a big country, not that important in those days, perhaps, but still, why did they send you as ambassador there?
I'm now very cautious what I'm going to say, but we had a foreign minister who had the idea that this inbreeding of foreign ministries, not just Swiss, everywhere, should be kind of broken up by bringing in people from the outside world. For Switzerland, in the US, that already had been done. You have these political appointees, but never in Switzerland and never in European countries, in fact. So they were looking out for some people from the outside who, would be, say, able to do this. So they came to me. Actually, about, I think, 3 people, were the life experiment, whether, people from the outside can be diplomats. And with the other 2, the diplomatic corps people, they said, well, why them? We can do that. They don't have a particular skill. In my case, this was more difficult because I had this experience. Well, they also live in China, but because of this joint venture and say also the network I could create in China and abroad by presenting this model to the outside world, that gave me status in China. And for instance, Jiang Zemin, he was the chairman of this newly set up a foreign investment commission, to see what is a foreign investment and to check that the foreigners don't get too much. So I had negotiations with him at the time. Of course, no one at that time thought he'd ever become president of China, but so there were a lot of
Why,
people.
he was not smart enough or what?
I'm not saying that, but
Okay, so now, that was around the time that you just got married, am I right?
later. I got
Later.
married 89.
89, and you were the ambassador there in
The 90s. Yeah.
90s.
Yeah,
Okay, so you were
90.
already married.
Yeah, as ambassador.
Right. So, by the way, I will remember my saying, Rita is a lovely, lovely, wonderful lady, and she's a
will
medical
tell her.
doctor, dermatologist, wonderful, fantastic human being. Is she willing to go with you to China and live there?
Yeah, actually, she had just opened her practice.
In China?
In Switzerland, in Lucerne. And so when the government asked me to, go there as ambassador, she had to find a solution for her practice, which she did. And within days, she also, decided to join. And so off we went to China.
I understand that she speaks Chinese. I have
Yeah.
never heard you speak Chinese. Is her Chinese a lot better than yours?
It's clearly better. yeah.
Clearly better.
Or maybe a lot better. Because I don't know to write or read, while she does.
Wow.
But she insisted not having a teacher. So when we were living there, every day she spent hours learning Chinese and writing.
With a teacher?
No,
Without a teacher?
Yeah, she didn't want a teacher. For
Okay.
whatever reason. Yeah.
So can the two of you carry on a conversation in Chinese?
Yeah, we do that sometime when we don't want anyone to understand what we say. Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Very good. Okay, now to your art. What was the motivation for you to start? I know that you started to collect, because we had a small gathering of our present circle members, by the way. All of you are welcome to join as a PC members. Anyway, I understand that you start collecting when you were 25. Oh, well, not collecting, but you start buying your first artwork at age 25. So you're, unlike me, who is artistically challenged, you're artistically endowed. So what made you start buying Chinese art?
That happened much later,
Okay.
Chinese art.
Okay.
First, I was into Western art. At that age, I had no idea about China, I had no idea about Chinese art. So it was Western art. And of course, I grew up with some art on the wall, like, 19th century art, like some kind of romantic realism, etc. And I didn't even notice what we had on the wall growing up. So
Your
only
parents.
only when I encountered the contemporary art, that had flesh and blood and flesh for me. So then I got really interested. And so then at some point, yes, I had this friend, as I said, who went bankrupt. So I bought the first painting from him. And then sometime later, I bought the second painting because I couldn't deal with abstract art.
You cannot.
I couldn't at that time. I didn't understand.
I still can't.
So I thought I better buy some painting, abstract painting, and confronting it, and it confronting me. And so I found an abstract small painting which had a hole punched in it, so it was very cheap. So I bought it, and
Purposely or by somebody mad with
No,
mad about
I
his
have
wife?
no idea. I think it was a mistake, or
Mistake, oh.
someone's mistake.
So okay, then you're in mainland China.
Yeah.
What made you start buying Chinese art later?
So first I followed the Chinese contemporary art from its beginnings because I happened to be there and I had an interest in art. So yes, I wanted to look around, but that proved to be much more difficult than I thought to look around because there was only a very short window of like the Star exhibition where one could see contemporary art in public. And that window closed very early again. There was like this campaign against spiritual pollution and all that. So that was the end of contemporary art in public. But I just didn't find it interesting at the time. As we discussed, it looked like 100 years too painted too late, etc. If you came with a mindset of Western contemporary art. So I started later. I started like actually in the 90s to collect art because then I felt now the Chinese artists have really found to their own language, and so it became interesting for me too. But I was not thinking anything else but buy a couple of works for me, which I really liked. But then I realized that no one was collecting more than randomly a few pieces of this Chinese contemporary art. So then I gave myself this mission we talked about, to build a collection that actually a national museum should, but did not in China. So mirroring the art production across all media along the timeline. So I set out to do that. Yeah.
But you also befriended a lot of the artists. You're not just interested in the art, but it seems that you're also interested in the creative brain behind those arts. Why do you do that?
Well, my ultimate study object was always China. And I studied it, as a business person on the factory floor and on the ministerial level. I studied it through politics and ambassador. Very interesting. We had like development projects, in China. We had like in Tibet, we did a medical university in Tibetan medicine, for instance. We had the human rights dialogue. You have the political analysis. Actually, it's a very interesting job.
The medical school was
job.
in relationship to Switzerland.
Yeah, we had the idea, we set it up, we financed it. Switzerland. So because we, as Swiss, we were allowed to do more than most nations in China. So what we did actually, we found the last 2-3 professors of Tibetan medicine that were there, still kind of practicing, and then we had like 34 villages could send their most intelligent person for this education, with a commitment to go back to their village, not go anywhere else. And so a 4-year course, and we did this several times in Tibetan medicine. It was very interesting. So I'm just mentioning it. My approach to China was quite broad, also political. But the third approach was really through contemporary art, to study China. And I met, I don't know, probably, or certainly 2,000 artists over time. I mean, over more than 40 years. And I learned a lot. And for a foreigner, it was very difficult, particularly 80s, 90s, to see how just a very normal Chinese citizen lives as a diplomat as well. The other diplomats, they, had never seen a Chinese apartment, for instance, and they living in Beijing had never seen it. So the approach through Chinese art, which of course I had to do in the night and maybe weekend, I could see a very different reality, which otherwise very difficult for a foreigner.
Just a plug for Asia Society, okay? Uli started, you went to China in 1979, you started to look at arts and artists in the 80s, and then you started buying in the 90s. In 1999, Asia Society perhaps was the first non-profit organization that did a program on postmodernist Chinese art. It's called Inside Out. The book, I think, is still somewhere. You go to a library, you can find it in our library here. And it was shown in San Francisco, New York, and Hong Kong, 1999. Of course, a lot of our members begin to be interested in that. By that time, they can see perhaps some potential. Some of them do it for money. Other people do it for purely art interest. Other people do it hybrid. And so, of course, I always tell those Asia Society members who bought art and made a lot of money out of it to remember to give a little bit back to the Asia Society. But anyway, it's up to them. So you were really, really ahead of your time. When you started to collect those arts, you said systematically, I think you used that word. Can you bound on that? What do you mean? What do you mean by systematically? All the top artists that, in your opinion, or maybe different genre of them, or what? What is that definition?
Well, first I must congratulate you on that vision you had at the time to show this exhibition. It was really the first, first large-scale exhibition. There were other exhibitions and gallery exhibitions, but this was the first large-scale exhibition. And actually, I did also lend some works to that exhibition, and you can see them in M+ now. Yeah, so they ended up in Hong Kong. Yeah, but you asked me something else, like
how did you? What is the methodology that you use to systematically collect?
Yeah, I had then the ambition to build what you would call an encyclopedic collection, which means it's not my personal taste deciding what I'm going to collect, but whatever should be represented in the collection, so that one could read the storyline of Chinese contemporary art from day one to today. That was the idea. And then, how would an institution collect? That's actually the essence of the question. You, of course, have to build a knowledge about that particular field, that's obvious, which actually almost no one had outside from China. And even early on, the Chinese couldn't travel, as you know, so they couldn't go and see art, while I could travel for professional reasons or had to travel anywhere. So it was easier for me to do that research than it was even for a Chinese individual at that time. So there were no galleries, though, so there was the artists to buy works from. So I bought 80–90% from artists. And of course, I came to a city.
No middleman, cheaper.
Yes. Of course, first I had to go and search for artists. Then I was introduced to more artists. And then at some point, artists started to search for me, because all of a sudden we became important to be in the collection. And I was really the only foreigner, who was so weird to the strange in their eyes, even wondered what they were doing. And at that time, early time, many artists, did not have yet the skill and certainly not the habit to talk about their art, for instance. So for many, it was like the first time to really talk about why they did what they were doing. So through that, of course, I learned ever more and ever more artists. Of course, an artist had to bring me to her friends, his friends, and very often knowing, there's nothing there for me, but you had to do that as a courtesy in China. So yes, I also wasted a lot of time. That's part of it. You may enter a studio and you already know after 10 seconds, well, that's not it, but you can't just walk out.
Goodbye.
So yeah, all these things.
Another plug. The Asia Society Hong Kong Center did an art called Light Before Dawn, Chinese art, modernist art, 1974 to 1985. And many of those artists are exactly the same ones that you also know personally and bought from. And you see the Buddha head up there? You like the Buddha head up there? It was given to us by one of our members, by the way. We don't have the money to buy it, but one of our members did. And that was Zhang Huan. It was the same one who is on the front cover of the Inside Out book that we published. Since you have a Western art background, and then you become a researcher and very knowledgeable about the Chinese modern art, how do you compare the two of them? It seems to me that as an outsider, that the Chinese art are very much more of a reflection of society, the political environment, and so forth. The Western art, some do, but others seems to be a little bit more, perhaps, just pure imaginative creativity of the artist, less perhaps reflecting the society. Would that be correct to say? And how do you compare these Chinese art with the Western modernist art?
I had to do a lot of learning for exactly that reason, because they come from such different thinking, such different practice, and maybe most important, such different reality. And of course, everyone has a blind spot, about, particularly you look at art where you lack the context. And this is so important somehow to build this context. So your blind spot, of which you have to become aware first, and many refuse that, become smaller. So I actually did this also through exhibitions. Like I did an exhibition about shanshui, about landscape painting. How
modern.
Yeah, well, how do contemporary artists of today, how do they relate to this culture, to shanshui art, for instance?
From the ancient days.
Yeah, so
over time.
Yeah, so say analyzing this, I learned a lot about the tradition and how these artists, like some even very contemporary, they feel, the shanshui tradition is very important, and we have to carry it on to next generations. That's a thought you can never find in the West. I have never ever met a Western artist who would feel a responsibility to say transmit the tradition. So some say that, some say, yes, the tradition is very important, but we have to take it somewhere else. And others say, well, I study it, but it's a beautiful dream, doesn't give me anything. And then there are others that mock this tradition. So I did the same thing also about calligraphy. So that's how I, try to overcome my blind spot and learn and develop ever more knowledge. But it's also important you have a knowledge of Western art, which was lacking in China. So maybe in China, a lot of people got carried away and thought, wow, this is the greatest thing on earth, not knowing that maybe this has been researched in the West long time ago. So I think it's very important you bring these two worlds and say know-how of the two worlds together to make the best choices.
I want to pick up on one word that Uli said. I think is great. You mentioned about every one of us have blind spots. To me, the fact that someone knows his own blind spot and go about minimizing it is a sign of a great man. So, ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at a great man here. We did 4 modern Chinese female artist exhibitions in the last 3-4 years here in Hong Kong Asia Society. And 2 out of the 4 lived in Paris for much of their life. So you really have an influence from the West. And some of the artists from China, modern Chinese artists, are saying that, maybe the younger ones, they say that the influence of the Western sense of aesthetics and painting and so forth perhaps influenced them even more than the Chinese. But I would imagine that the ones that you knew 30 years ago are the ones that don't even know the West. They are truly coming straight out of China, right? Do you see a change, as generational change, as the younger artists who have more opportunity to travel the world, the mix with artists from other parts of the world? Do you see some changes of that? And where do you project China's art to be 10, 20 years later?
Of course, there is a change because the first generations, they did not have any access to Western art after, say, 1905 or something. So when they gained autonomy to do what they wanted to do, before it was all socialist realism, and they had to commit to certain tasks. So like 79, they could all of a sudden decide what they wanted to paint. But they had very fragmented knowledge, and it only started to come in at that time. So later, and then you see in the first generation, yes, they see now this art, but they were mainly looking still at expressionism, impressionism art, of the past. And you could see they look at the contemporary art from the West, and they may not have fully understood it, but these errors in understanding can be very fruitful and very productive. So just as the West seeing the Chinese art, the first, there is art they could immediately access, and then there is art which requires context where the West still has no clue. Same thing happened, of course, from the other side. So where is it going? The first 20 years, say, in China of contemporary art, you saw a distinct Chinese perspective in their art. And then, started what we would consider call the globalization in art as well. Globalization meaning everyone knows everything or can know everything, what's done wherever. And that's had, of course, a strong impact. And then what we saw was like this one stream of Chinese contemporary art. And on the other hand, we see this global mainstream, which still dominates the art world. This global mainstream of Western-dominated art. And they seem to merge now. These two streams are actually merging. And my hope is that this Chinese kind of art creation will not become an endangered species, in this kind of merging, but will have its own power and influence on this global art. So when I was looking at what to collect, I always asked myself the question: is this artwork one that can contribute to the global art discourse? That doesn't mean it has to look Western at all. Or is this a work like the very early works that is immensely important for Chinese contemporary art history, but couldn't really contribute yet to this global art discourse? But we see more and more, of that art coming out of China and Hong Kong.
I want to reserve 10 minutes at least at the end for everybody to ask questions. So can the microphone be ready, huh? So last question, because Ambassador Ulisek does have another event to go to, so we have a hard stop of 7 o'clock. You have said that one day your art, you believe that it should go back to China. I think you said something like that. And eventually you chose to give it to Hong Kong. So as one citizen of Hong Kong, I can represent no one, not even my wife. As one citizen, I thank you immensely, Uli, for enriching our cultural and artistic life here. So you gave it to M+, 2013? 2012. Are you happy with it? You think that it will do justice to your collection? You were so kind to show me personally the collection at M+ one time. What can you say about your experience here in Hong Kong and with M+ in particular?
I think it's a fantastic museum. It's really up to the latest technology, knowledge about how to present art, which has become a complicated business, particularly contemporary art with all its facets and materials and dimensions and all that. So the museum is really a great building.
Designed by Swiss architects.
Yes. So, that's great. Of course, the legal framework has changed, and it remains to be seen what that means exactly for contemporary art. And so I'm very curious, and more than curious, I mean, I have also a stake in this. How will this situation then condense in the art presentation of contemporary art? I don't know the answer yet.
Just for your information, ladies and gentlemen, about 5-6 years ago, Ai Weiwei some Ai Weiwei work was exhibited in Hong Kong. Anyone know where it is? Asian Society, right here, in our exhibition hall up there. And Alice came to me and said, "What do you think?" I said, "Don't ask. I'm artistically challenged. Art is art. You do what is necessary." And we had I will wait here. I think we have 4 or 5 pieces. And in fact, whenever there are mainland Chinese people that come visit me, I always make them meet me here because I want to show off the Asia Society and our campus. And I always bring them to see those art. That's Light Before Dawn, 74 to 85. So we're delighted that, we can do something here. Any question from the floor, anyone? The Consul General, you're not allowed? No. Please. In front, yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a question. You mentioned about the upcoming opening of M+, that you're looking forward to that. I would like to, this actually is the end of a long story, starting when you moved to China. It's really a long story, so I would like to know how you feel about it. And also maybe a second question, if I may, what is your next project?
Of course, I'm exhilaratingly happy that the museum opens. It's a long story. I'm very happy about the result. So, yeah, it looks great. And in that sense, it's a very good ending for this chapter. But then the next chapter, I'm still contemplating.
What I'm interested in is he still have a lot of art. His home is like a museum. So I love to see what will happen to that. Oh, is that Azerbaijan? Yeah, please, member.
Thank you. I was just wondering, like Mr. Ronnie said, I'm from Azerbaijan, meaning ex-Soviet Union. Did you feel there was a lot of Soviet or Russian influence on Chinese art at that time and less now, or is it the same? That's first question. And second, I didn't Google search anything about you, so I just want to know whether you did the quarantine, what made you come back and stay here, and you must be very brave to do it or not, or do you still prefer to live in Hong Kong, or are you going back? Thank you.
Naughty, naughty.
Of course, the Soviet Union has been very influential in the art creation in China, particularly after the revolution, after 1949. Mao did a trip to Moscow and was very impressed by the socialist realism. So he brought professors and he brought that kind of knowledge to China, to the academies. So that then became the dominant trait in the Chinese art production. Same purpose, propaganda, present the world as it ought to be, educate the masses. So very similar, like Soviet Union. Of course, that wasn't the only art production. There was always in China, say, the traditional media, they went on, but also with their limitations of artistic freedom. As to my quarantine, yes, I had to do it. I had to do 3 weeks, but I was very fortunate. I could go to the museum on work days, but very strict surveillance, who I would meet there and how to go from my hotel there and back.
I've got to tell everybody, you're not allowed to say anything that Uli says in this program to anybody. No, I'm kidding. The lady over there.
First of all, thank you so much, really from my heart and from the hearts of everyone here for your contribution to Hong Kong and to world art. My question is, you've described your collection and your collection strategy as encyclopedic, but I wonder whether any one period within that contemporary span of your collection, or one artist, or what really speaks to your soul as well as to your collection strategy?
Of course, there are some favorites, but I would prefer not to name them. It's like, if I would ask you who is your favorite child. This is a very difficult decision. And of course, the media are so diverse and the works come across so differently. How to compare a video with maybe a painting. It's very difficult, say, with a large number of works, to choose one thing as the thing. I'm not able to do that.
Sanisa?
So, thank you. They say that art should represent what is happening and is current right now. And at the moment, there are a few trends that are quite big. ESG is one of them. Of course, diversity is the other. Could you speak a little bit about how that has impacted your way of collecting? Thank you.
By building encyclopedic collection, that collection should also mirror, say, the representation of these minorities, or however we call them, in the number of artists, practicing artists. So, however many, for instance, female students study, very small numbers in the 80s, growing numbers then, that's also reflected in the collection. And of course, other minorities and other gender issues, they have been taken up more, say, over the last 10, 15 years. Early on, there was no visible characteristics in that sense. But yes, they exist now in the most current acquisitions I did.
Last question, go to Kanyan Lo. Kanyan?
That's quite a burden to name. Anyway, thank you so much for your donation. I'd like to know what made you choose what to donate and what direction, and was the response from Hong Kong side, what they wanted, and you will make this museum the leading institution in the Asia Pacific. And what's that within your encompassment? Please share with us your vision and your views.
Well, that's very kind, your judgment so far. One can safely say that there is no other collection which has been put together as an encyclopedic collection. And if I look, say, at the co-collectors from mainland in particular, I had like a head start with more experience in collecting. What do collectors normally start with the two-dimensional things? So yes, they have paintings, they have lots of paintings, but they stayed away from installations, they stayed away from photo, they stayed away from performance and all that. So it took a long time before Chinese mainland collectors discover other media. And the material is not there anymore. So in that sense, my collection is one of its own, and it couldn't be built again as of now. Now, how did I make... No, it could not be built again, but the material is just not there.
Right.
So I then selected, actually I did that myself, selected about 1,500 works out of about now it's maybe 2,500 altogether, in a way that this 1,500 pieces could actually document the storyline of Chinese contemporary art from its inception, with some earlier works from Cultural Revolution, so as to see where the first generations of Chinese contemporary artists, grew up with and had their knowledge from, to 2012. So that's how I selected the works that one could read that line.
Don't clap yet. I know you want to do it most intensely and sincerely, but let me invite my executive director, Alice Wong, to come to the stage and close the evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie, and thank you, Uli. I am so happy to see so many faces here tonight for this program, which I personally have been looking forward to for a long time. And tonight, There's so many people to thank. Of course, our Dr. Sig and Ronnie, of course, for letting me do my job. And so, and also the board. We have some board members here, Michael, Vernon, and Rona. Thank you. I have really one of the best jobs in the world, and in that, I get to run this institution in a way that really befits the vision that was established 30 years ago. As you know, we celebrate 30th anniversary. And thank you, Consul General, for your support for bringing, we are looking forward to further collaboration with the Swiss Consulate. And we've done many of a program, and I know many of the people in the diplomatic community. We're really, this is what Asia Society is about. It's about connection, and it's about learning. And today, I think you heard from Nico, Asia Society France was launched officially today, our 14th center, and also the Genesis, like Ronnie said, was here. And by the way, those of you who know Mary Lee, my predecessor, Mary Lee Turner, she and Ed was in the audience to really help launch a center, and as well as the former CG, Singapore CG Fu, who was here as CG and now Ambassador Fu in France. She was also in the audience at our invitation. So this is what Asia Society, the network, is about. And so thank you all for being here. We have some great programs coming up. I think you heard about the November 9th. We're going to talk about Afghanistan. Really, a really topical light and darkness, stories of hope from Afghanistan. So we'll have speakers directly from Afghanistan, as well as those from in Hong Kong and London. So please join us January 9th, and that's a collaboration with JP Morgan. We're really delighted that we'll be bringing that program here. And before I let our Uli go, I need to give Asia Society Hong Kong a plug. December 7th, we're going to do our 10th anniversary gala celebration. It was 10 years ago. I came back from the States and became a consultant first, and then later on became the executive director of this Asia Society Hong Kong Center. And remember, it was February 2012 when I first met Uli. I think it was maybe during our Basel month. And I think you spoke on this stage as well. And I know this is the third or fourth time, because 2015, you also shared a stage, I think, with Claire Sue, talking about Hong Kong's art ecology. So that was 2015. So I know you've been, and in some ways, that's really the genesis also of the Swiss Center. And so I'm really delighted that this year, for our 10th anniversary celebration,
on this site,
we're going to be honoring 10 individuals. And Dr. Sig is among them, and it's really appropriate because of your leadership in getting the Swiss Center started, and also the collaboration in really getting the first European center started, and that is something that we're really excited about. And please join us, for those of you who have not heard about December 7th. You'll hear more about it in the days to come. I know it's confusing. I apologize. But we're going to do it better. This year is going to be a really tremendous gala celebrating 10 years. And in fact, when I came back, I left Hong Kong in 2003. And at that time, there were 3 projects that was in the work, art-related. It was Asia Society Hong Kong, it was Daigun, and it was M+. And if you asked me 20 years ago who would open first, I would not have said Asia Society Hong Kong. So we opened 10 years ago. I think our board member reminds me of that. And then it was Daigun, and then now M+. And we're really celebrating that milestone. And we are really delighted that Asia Society Hong Kong can be part of that, the growth of Hong Kong art ecosystem. So thank you all for your support. And we look forward to welcoming you back at future programs live, so that I can see all the faces in person and not through the Zoom boxes. So thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Ambassador Uli Sig.